Okay, so for our presentation for you guys today, we're going to be talking about our training / presentation that we're creating in collaboration with a bunch of other organizations to confront multiple levels of racism. We're going to be covering the overview of our project, the intent and goals of our project, the theory behind it, how our project challenges white supremacy, the group process, so like how we came up with it and all that, and then a quick look at our anti-racism training, strengths and weaknesses of our project, and then we'll open it up for questions from you guys. So first, our overview and goals. So the overview of the project, like I said, we were creating a presentation covering and breaking down the different levels and forms of racism. We used the definitions that was given to us at the beginning of the semester by a professor. So we used their equation of racism as well as the iceberg that was beautifully drawn for us. We wanted to make it accessible to different groups on campus, so we decided to collaborate with a bunch of campus organizations, those being BSU, so the Black Student Union, SIN, the Student Involvement Network, and DiverseU. We were working with them to get feedback on our presentation and work towards improving it. The intent of it was to explain the multiple levels of racism, so the iceberg, explain the iceberg and break that down, provide people with examples to better contextualize those levels, and then teach people how to confront and handle these levels if presented to them, and we'll go a little bit more into detail later when we give you guys a little bit of a show, show you guys a little bit of what our slides for them look like. The goals were to collaborate and get feedback from other organizations involved with combating white supremacy and racism, and that's why we chose to work with the Black Student Union, because they do a lot of activism and trying to break down stereotypes and that sort of thing. And same thing with the Student Involvement Network. They do a lot of diversity events, and so we thought that they would be a really good group to collaborate with. And DiverseU, obviously, diversity, so another a really good group to collaborate with. So yeah, we wanted to. The biggest goal about this when we were talking about creating this is that we didn't want our presentation to be like a one and done thing. We wanted this to be something that other groups like BSU could take it and maybe present it at the Black Solidarity Summit, or DiverseU can take it and present it at the DiverseU weekend, and it be reusable, recyclable, and improvable, and everybody could kind of just take it as kind of like a bare bones sort of thing and make it meet whatever needs they need to use it for. So that was the main goal.
Applied theory. All right, so I guess I'll start off. So one of the things that influenced our decision to do this was Towards Collective Liberation by Chris Crass, praxis-based organizing. So you have this idea, this concept, this theme, and you take action by implementing it, doing events and campaigns and workshops. But the main thing is doing a review of the action and evaluation to figure out what worked and what didn't, the strengths and weaknesses. And then the final question is, how can I improve my original idea or concept? So it's very cyclical. And the other is SNCC, grassroots organization, and it's just power to the people. Give the people the tools that they need so that they can hopefully promote change for themselves and then to their community.
And jumping more, just a little bit more with SNCC and Towards Collective Liberation, just the idea of leaders are people who create more leaders. So making this tool that can be used to empower other people. And then the idea of educating for critical consciousness, of course. Also, The Possessive Investors in Whiteness by George Lipsitz helped us pull out the ideas for the white supremacy and maintenance of white power, that middle chunk of the iceberg that we'll get to in a little bit. And then Racism Without Racist, which was my secondary book, looking at colorblind racism and giving that as an overview of that to think about new racial discrimination and white supremacy culture, so talking about white values being seen as the normal norms and standards.
How our project challenges white supremacy. So the main thing is that we're going to be doing is developing an anti-racism program that displays the dynamics of systemic racism and developing a process that combats institutionalized racism at a personal level that makes people more self-aware, self-reflective, developing of their skills and empowering people to take action.
So looking at some of the areas that we talked about in class, we feel that the bolded areas are the main parts that are areas where our project is addressing white supremacy. So as my colleague mentioned, we're talking about relationships in this project, people working to educate other people and building shared language and definitions. For publicity, just working with these groups to get the message out and letting their networks know about our project, and it's going to be presented at Diverse U, hopefully, who do their own advertising.
Black Solidarity.
And the Black Solidarity Summit, and then, you know, just for you guys to think about and maybe help us out with later, just ideas of how can we spread this PowerPoint further, so it could maybe go beyond our university if you have networks that you could put it on, or people that would like to hear about it. And then lastly, ours is in the Public Collective Project, or quarter, because it's a educational initiative. There's a higher potential risk associated with this Public Collective quarter. However, we also learned that that's where the most possibilities can be generated.
Okay, so our group process. So we met a few times in the branch center, and in class as well, we also followed through quite a few ideas. So we just worked together to brainstorm ideas, and we came up with sort of a pretty good mixture of all of our ideas. We all sort of wanted something educational, and it was mainly the question of who our target audience would be. So we came to a pretty clear consensus, especially many of us are very well networked, having members of the Black Student Union in our group, and being able to talk to our Black Student Union president about our idea, as well as my personal job is the diversity student coordinator, so I was able to speak on behalf of that and how helpful it would be for the student involvement network in that sect. So we divided up our tasks and set deadlines, and after that was completed, we met to create and go over our presentation, and it was an ongoing work in progress, which is really cool. And during the process, it was pretty collective. Like if there was an area that one wanted to add to, it was not limited by any means.
Okay, so some of the things that we have done is we selected our project, we split up the iceberg among each other, so we each got a little part of the iceberg, and then we created the presentation, we contacted BSU president. So when we first came up with the idea, I went to a BSU meeting because I am a BSU member, and I brought it up to the BSU president and got their approval for it. They hyped me up, you know, so I was like, perfect, let me go hype up the rest of my group. We talked to, like my co-presenter said, head of Diverse U, so we kind of had it in there. Didn't have to really go anywhere to talk to Diverse U. We had it. And then as far as the Student Involvement Network goes, my co-presenter is a sinner, and I'm also a sinner, so we already had 2 sinners on board. So it's really easy to get the sinners there. The things that we still need to do is actually present in person to all 3 groups, with, again, shouldn't be super hard just because we do have connects within all 3 groups, so it'll be really easy to just like pop in and do that. As far as contacting the supervisor of SIN, I mentioned it to them right before this class starts, so that's done. We'll move that to the other side of this presentation. And then the last thing that we kind of wanted to like talk to you guys all about, and we'll talk to BSU and the rest of the centers and the rest of Diverse U about this too, is how to make our PowerPoint public, because like we said, we want this to be like a collaboration sort of thing, and we want as many people to be able to access it if it's something that they feel like they could use in like a presentation or in a classroom or anything like that. So we need to decide whether that's something we should do first off, if it's something we want to do, and decide how and where to share it. I know some of my personal concerns were just like, because it is like a Google Doc sort of thing, like, and it is meant to be edited, like, is there a way we can share it so that people can edit it but still keep like our original one so that that one doesn't get kind of like distorted, I guess, sort of thing. So yeah, we'll probably open that up to you guys to help us out with during the question section.
You know, they're having a eating and meeting, by the way.
Eating and meeting.
We had a few challenges. One was shifting ideas. We cut a few things because we didn't have enough time or we didn't have an in to a certain place. A few others, in addition to these, were we thought about talking to congressional candidates, educating them on certain issues and getting them to take a stand about anti-racism and specifically that they will take anti-racist action. And then, similar to another group, we talked about doing frat and sorority anti-racism trainings. And then organizing against the white supremacists who were running for ASUM, which was shot down because of defensiveness and just
Don't
them
get too
acting
much
victimized.
publicity either.
Yeah, like the biggest problem with that one was just like that person who was running was already seen as like a super charismatic and a quote nice guy. So we didn't want it to come off like he was being attacked again. Since he was already victimizing himself, we felt that if we went that route, he would use that to victimize himself further and gain more support and more empathy. So we kind of like scratched that idea.
He ended up only getting like 7% of the votes.
Yeah, he lost in the primary, so it was like whatever. Like.
Okay, so a quick look at our presentation. This is just an outline of what we're going to cover.
Do you have the slides? Because we can pass those out too. Like
Yeah,
this
but they're
one.
not all the way done.
Oh, okay.
Like we said, the definition of racism and using the iceberg. We're going to have a section on oppressive power, so using an example of microaggression, defining that, using scenarios and a way to combat. White power.
It's like the maintenance of white supremacy, so we're going to be looking at policies and laws, such as like the war on drugs and like Clinton's 3 strikes laws, and institutions, so we're going to be looking at like suburbia versus the inner city, and like white flight, and then how people are portrayed in the media, and we're going to discuss how to combat that.
And then lastly, talking about identity power using the example of mass incarceration and identity creation and norms. And then we're going to have a question and answer.
So we'll be talking about the strengths and weaknesses. So one of the things that we would like to accomplish with our presentation is to hopefully refine it by giving it to other I guess organizations, and then having them present it and refine it even more so that every iteration becomes better and better. We want to make this as flexible as possible. We of course want to empower the local community, give the people the tools that they need. And one of the main things, like seeking feedback, which is also that review section of the praxis-based organizing. And simple introduction and awesome nuance.
Oh yeah, it's just a simple, it's a pretty brief, simple presentation that people can build off of, and it doesn't offer a kind of like really simplistic definition of racism, even though it is so simple and introductory.
One of our main concerns is like the impact will be like too low. We kind of worry if people will take our presentation to heart and possibly use our presentation in the future. We were kind of worried about understandability. Will it be too difficult to for the people presenting to speak on the topics within the presentation? And are the groups that we are giving this to going to present it in the future? And a lot of it is like constrained by time, so this reflects back to when we were trying to find something to do for our group project. We were running out of time, so that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have some questions, 'cause that's what we do. So first thoughts, first reactions. Does anyone have any questions? Ooh, I see hands. Friend one.
A simple
solution for having one document that doesn't change and one that does. Just have 2 copies in your Google Drive, one that people can view but not edit, and then have one that people can edit. And yeah, I would just have 2 copies.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. I hope you don't think I'm being rude. I'm just writing all this down, especially because we're trying to work on like how to refine this presentation.
Friend 2.
Oh,
That's you.
so 2 things. I think that it would be super beneficial for you to bring this to the Greek system,
Okay.
coming from somebody who was in the Greek system for 4 years.
Okay.
I think that would definitely be incredibly beneficial.
So share the PowerPoint with FSI then?
Yep, so I know that the new director of FSI, I'm pretty sure she's super chill.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah, I actually haven't spoken to her
Yeah, no,
yet.
she works in the SIN office as well, so it's not, again, we don't have to go very far to find out. So.
Yeah, I would totally talk to her about having this shared with the Greek system. And a question I have is, so your presentation is just basically a PowerPoint
Yeah.
kind of thing?
We might be able to pull it up. Can we?
Because I'm wondering if you want to try to incorporate some kind of like, because I know that sometimes we recently did like
It's just gonna have all our names on it.
Oh, just kidding then.
we
never
recently
mind.
did like a presentation kind of thing with the Greek system about like empathy or whatever, and it was just basically somebody talking at us. So I remember kind of looking around and seeing that a lot of people were starting to zone out.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there would be any way for you guys to incorporate maybe some kind of like discussion or some kind of interactive thing just to get people talking, and that might help with your worry about it not sticking.
Yeah.
That might help.
So I can speak on it from my specific section of the project. I'm the one doing the microaggressions. So when it says scenarios, I wrote out 3 different scenarios, and I'm gonna give that to the people, and they can kind of work through those scenarios. And the question basically is like, what's the meaning behind? So one of the scenarios is like, you're at your job, and your manager comes over and pats you on the shoulder and says, "Speak Mexican for us. We're bored." And so the question is, what's the meaning behind this question? Why would it be seen as a microaggression? What level, because there's 3, I break it down into 3 types of microaggression, so which type of microaggression is this? So it's like, within the presentation, we're asking you guys to participate as well, so it would be interactive.
Cool, yeah, because I think having that would be
Yeah.
Sounds like you're a guy.
Any other for the first question or response? Do you have any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just
Friend 3.
had a thought. And forgive me if you guys have actually mentioned this in your presentation, I missed it, but did anybody talk to the Diversity Advisory Council on campus to see if maybe they could like make suggestions to the president or somebody to make it mandatory?
No, but my 2 faculty facilitators for DiverseU are, one of them leads the DAC and the other sits on it, and I am also supposed to be sitting on it. I just haven't been to a meeting in a second, but I can absolutely, bring that forward.
I just think, it would be good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I'm
Friend
just
4.
curious, is there any like attempts within your presentation to combat the effects of like white fragility?
Ooh.
Can I?
Go for it.
Sure. My section of our presentation is what is racism. It's our like intro and how we define racism. And with my approach to that and using the definition that our professor provided for us, is that due to how power is structured, you can basically abolish the idea that reverse racism exists. I want to really dissect that through our presentation and our opening. And I think that that will be able to tackle that, as well as like showing the iceberg and the physicality and giving the background story of the iceberg in terms of like it's much larger than it appears, and just looking at all the different contributing layers to it.
One thing that I think we could add into our presentation that could help that, friend 3, is friend 4, sorry, friend 4. You forgot. Is like we don't have currently a list of agreements at the beginning, or kind of like just like what we want you to get out of this at the beginning, and I think that could be really successful to say, this isn't targeting you. When you start feeling uncomfortable, that is okay, that's a normal reaction. If you need to step out, come back, you know.
It's on this laptop if you guys just want to take a look. It's not complete yet because it is a work in progress, but if you guys just want to like go through it and like.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think is interesting or exciting about our project? Hype us up. What do you think are its strengths, and how do you think it could be stronger? I said hype us up. So.
You guys don't like it, huh? I dig it.
Yeah. Cool. Glad to hear it.
Let's have a question about weaknesses, so dive in.
So what multimedia aspects do you have of this? Like, is it, I know you said there will be audience engagement and interaction, but like, what else, I guess?
I guess like the biggest thing about it is because it's something that we're giving away to other organizations, they can kind of make that decision as far as how they want to use it as well. So if like the BSU wants to take it and post it up on the BSU Facebook page, they're free to do that. Same thing with DiverseU, like if they want to share it during that, they can definitely use it. But as far as the presentation itself goes, like it's just the PowerPoint for now.
We have some graphics in there.
Yeah. There's,
What about like, I've obviously never ran an anti-racism training, so I don't really know if this is a normal thing, but I would assume that most probably have like some sort of like small group breakout sessions. Are you guys going to do stuff like that?
So,
My bad, I'm sorry, I keep cutting you guys off.
no, it's okay. I think we all have answers to all of these. I think one of the ways that I've envisioned it is sort of like, this is a start. So like many anti-racist trainings are not about 20 minutes long, which is about how long our presentation would be, maybe 20 to 30. So a lot of what I would imagine is this would just give you a rundown and something to look at and talk about, and then from there you can break into more activities. And there's so many things you can do with the training. So we just kind of focused in on just sort of a broad introductory like way to get started.
What has been successful before, I don't want to step on my co-presenter's toes too much, because I did organize our tunnel of oppression, and I know it's been used for DiverseU in the past, is having someone facilitate like a breakout group. After tunnel of oppression, it was called like the Circle of Hope, but certainly having like a follow-up conversation, and a lot of our organizations have had that in place, or our events have already had that in place, so don't think it'd be too tricky to tack on there. Thank you.
Do you guys have any measures that you're going to take to ensure that like this presentation doesn't kind of go beyond your reach, or like it's being used for like different goals, or the intent of the presentation is misunderstood between people and it's more detrimental than helpful?
yeah, I think that was the whole question of like us not knowing whether or not like how much to share it and like how public we do want to make it. Just because like right now, like the three that we have chosen are like groups that we have like connections to and that we're like familiar with and we're involved with, and so it's easy for us to kind of like keep tabs on that sort of thing. And so like when we start reaching out into like other organizations or just making it public, I guess that's like a question that I have like either for my co-presenters or for all of you, and that I'll probably have for like the other organizations that we're like currently working with, is just like how do we prevent it from like getting like exactly.
It's a really good question.
So yeah, if you guys have any ideas for us, that'd be dope, because I genuinely don't know.
Maybe if we, oh sorry.
No, I have something else.
Oh sure, I was like maybe if we set up like a really cheap website and had like an email address and you could contact us for a copy of the presentation, if we just like did like an intro to it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
One thing that I was thinking about was having a video of us presenting the presentation available potentially, because then it might help somebody who's trying to figure out how to use it get an idea of what we're saying. And I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but maybe even just like audio, like we've been doing with these. But that could also cut down on flexibility, so.
This is kind of difficult part of our rubric is like quantifying success of the project. I don't know if I just missed this and you guys already said it, but how are you guys analyzing like what'll make your project successful? Like when you're finished, what's going to make you look at the project and say, yes, we did this?
At least at DiverseU, we do grid card swipers, and so we can get some pretty good quantitative data. And But I guess, yeah, it's really hard to gauge qualitative. If any of you would like to add.
At a lot of events, we do surveys. Like, Sin does that at every single one of the events. We ask for feedback on the spot. So, like, knowing, like, just like if they did it at any, if we would use that BSS or use that diversity or use that any Sin events, we would have surveys, and that's kind of how we would be able to measure, like, how successful this was. And then, again, getting that feedback, we can continue to improve it. So like I said, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but like me personally, I didn't want this to just be like oh, I did this for class, it's complete, I got my grade and done sort of thing. Like, I would like to continue to work on this throughout, like over time, I guess. Friend number 2 in the back.
So I know that presenter in the lovely yellow sweater
I was like, what color am I wearing?
Was talking about having the video or audio lectures. You could even probably print out, I don't know how realistic this would be, but maybe like having a short, like 1-page document about like tips for presenting this.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And then like X, Y, and Z, like having that,
and we do have things in the notes section so that I think somebody like can look at a PowerPoint, like you can print out, the PoWoPoint and the notes to get an idea of how you're doing it. But
yeah, and you can
that's
even
a
have
great
like
idea.
a separate document that's like when you're presenting this and addressing like your own privilege while you're presenting this or something along those lines, maybe.
Also, to add on to that, like if something were to go wrong or if there's a question that like you didn't feel equipped to answer, having potential for those, that document could be a really cool idea.
Like a little resource.
Mm-hmm.
Help.
My friend behind me kind of took what I was going to say, but yeah, the addition of like a quote-unquote teaching guide would probably be very helpful. If you allow for adaptation, it might not be as helpful, but definitely for the initial stages of it, to help present would be good.
Yeah.
So I know at least one of your members doesn't like when I become...
Oh my god,
Toby.
no!
So I'm not going to do
Toby.
that.
Oh, thank you.
It's just
I appreciate it. I don't know about the rest of y'all.
I'm not going to do that with that particular obnoxious voice. I do have some other comments that I think will disappoint you.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, I want you to first of all know how excited I am about what you're doing here. I think it's an amazing project you've got going on. It's got a lot of potential. I also want to put some cautions in front of you.
Okay.
So the analysis that you're planning on presenting, in my experience and those of my colleagues, is as powerful as a scalpel is. A scalpel in the hand of a skilled surgeon can do a lot of good. A scalpel can also do damage. So I'm not in any way suggesting you're not equipped to do it, but just to emphasize how powerful the content is and how dangerous it can be. So a couple of those dangers. One of them is the danger of inoculation, in that you put this powerful stuff into a room and people get just enough of it that they dismiss it. And then it's not effective, it's not going to be helpful for them anymore. So I'm a little concerned about 20 minutes.
Okay.
I think you need to unpack the kind of concepts you're working with here at least 45 minutes to an hour, minimally.
Okay.
That's one thing, because you want to not inoculate people by making it too short.
Yeah.
My other comment relates to a body of theory that I and some other trainers have developed, which applies to situations where you're dealing with either predominantly white audiences or all white audiences.
Yeah.
And it has to do with the nature of the crisis that we carry into a room when you're going to be doing a discussion about race. For the people of color entering that room, the crisis has been with them all their lives and they know about it.
Yeah.
For the white people entering the room, the crisis is unknown and yet suspected as they enter that room. So the kind of training process that I've been part of developed create a space for the safe and effective exposure of that crisis to the whole room, and then getting them out of the crisis.
Okay.
So what I've seen here is that you've got the crisis ready to be exposed by introducing this iceberg metaphor, but you got a way to get them out. And that can take many different forms.
Okay.
The simplest way to do is to give them some positive action that they can use that analysis to move themselves or the communities forward.
Yeah.
But you have to think about it in those terms. Otherwise, you're going to leave people just sort of exposed and very angry often, and you'll get a backlash on you. I don't know if that should happen to you. It might anyway, but it's got a lot of potential.
So I guess I just have a question for you. So like, what do you mean? Like, can you explain to me a little bit more about like what do you mean by like getting them away from the crisis? Like, because like for like my section specific, like I talk about the scenarios, right? Let them discuss that, and then after that, I give them ways to combat and like approach those situations if they're put into it. And so is that like a way?
That's one of the ways you do it,
Okay.
by giving people practical examples of how they can respond to this very powerful and analytical content.
Okay.
You don't want to do it in such a way that you are, particularly for the white people in the room, making them feel that because they went to the workshop, they don't have to do anything else.
Okay.
Because that's another form of inoculation.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to be able to give them enough of that sense that there's a problem, but then give them the resources they need in order to walk out of the room, not just feeling like there's a problem.
Absolutely. Okay.
My final comment is just about distribution.
Okay.
I think your classmates' comments are really helpful. I would encourage you to be more protective rather than less protective of the material you've developed.
Okay.
Because that's, again, it's like a scalpel or gunpowder or something. You want to be sure that it's in responsible hands, that people know how to use it and will use it well.
Absolutely.
And also put it out there so that anyone can use it, because then it could end up being used in dangerous ways.
Okay. Thank you.
But all that is in the context of much excitement about what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I didn't take me out of the class.
I appreciate that so much.
This is kind of a silly one, but do you guys have any ideas of images to use? I sort of hate the stock footage of like everybody's multiracial hands in a circle. And was just kind of like coming up with a blank when I was looking for images. No. Okay. Cats it is.
Why?
Cats it is!
Why not the iceberg?
No, the iceberg is in there.
But it's just not like, I think it would be a little boring to have an iceberg. I mean, you know,
People wouldn't know.
every single slide of the iceberg.
Drawing from the kind of images that you guys used for this presentation, the ones that really like I thought were like cool were ones that were locally based. Like I remember you guys had a picture of Mount Sentinel in there.
Yeah, we did.
So maybe look at getting some pictures from around campus. Like especially if you guys are planning on giving local resources, that'll be cool pictures. And just, if you can make it really locally based, I think that will just draw people in. And if you plan on bringing it to sorority, fraternity life, those guys go crazy for Mount Sentinel too.
Okay, good to know.
I would say in general, though, for images, like if you're having a really hard time coming up with an idea for something to represent your thought, just don't push it.
Yeah.
If it feels like it's cheesy or it's too much or it's just not effective, just don't use it. Like, I mean, you guys have some slides that don't have any visuals on it at all, and I think they're laid out really beautifully and they're clean and crisp, and that works just as well.
Okay, cool.
Oh, yes. More? Oh, could you?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
It's all me.
So, many of us chose to do educational trainings, and as we learned in this class, there's a long history of anti-racist education. Why do you think this is, and what are the strengths of educational projects, and what are its limitations?
So to echo what Professor said about inoculation, I know like I felt that way after, not necessarily like anti-racist trainings, but just like trainings or workshops in like middle school and stuff like that. And people would come in for a day, and then you'd all feel great and dandy, and then it's over, and you're like, all right, I did my part, and then it just disappears. So that's definitely a limitation. And like you said, finding a way to
Make sure that that information has retention.
Yeah, and application maybe.
Anybody else have any comments on that question? Go for it.
I would just say in terms of educational projects, in line with anti-racism training, most oftentimes it's people volunteering to go there.
Yeah.
You know, like if it's not in a school setting, like elementary school or middle school or whatever, people have to volunteer to go there,
Yeah.
like after you leave your primary education. You know, like
Yeah.
even this class, like we all voluntarily came
Yeah.
and went through a version of the training itself.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's a limitation within itself, and trying to, how do you reach out beyond, and I would say there's an argument within that to say that the education is to educate those and prepare those who already see it as a problem to go out and talk about it and create a dialogue. But I think that is one limitation that you kind of have to deal with.
Yeah, I've had some first-hand experience in high school facilitating trainings on domestic violence, sexism, and then here at a collegiate level on like LGBTQ allyship. And when it is not voluntary, when it is mandated, the response can be very, very highly negative. Sorry? Yeah, and so it is a really tricky dynamic to try to, how do you reach people without forcing them to be there? How do you make them want to be there? So after taking this class, what do you think are necessary and important elements to include in an anti-racism training?
I think discussion portions, making sure that people have the ability to ask questions maybe as soon as those questions come up. Just because I feel like, especially in a place like Missoula, a lot of people aren't used to talking about race in a very detailed way. And so they might already have a lot of questions built up. And once they have a safe place to talk about it, they might need to talk a lot.
Yeah. Cool. We'll go to you first, and then we'll come back.
I was going to say to be like very concise in definitions of terms, especially like racism,
Yeah.
and explain exactly what that is. And I think a lot of time, people who are experiencing what you're doing might think you're calling them a racist, but if you like give like a definition of like how systematic one that is, might remove some of that that block they put in.
So obviously you guys don't have like a semester or like a month or anything like that, but I think readings were really, really helpful for me and everyone else. So maybe like a couple pages from particularly powerful readings, especially ones that, for me, what oftentimes is the most powerful is like hearing about individual stories, especially like in Between the World and Me from Coates. That was like kind of jarring, like really reading the account of growing up as a black boy in America in Baltimore. So yeah, that like having those individual narratives like kind of more connect on a human level, which I think is super essential. Maybe like a little reading like that, like a couple page excerpts.
And to kind of build off that, I feel like there is a lot of power in narrative. I think that you also have to be careful with it, because it can also, like, within our culture, I think white people oftentimes can like discount it and be like, oh, they're being dramatic and you know, so like I think you really do have to be careful. But I think the power of narrative is really influential and kind of humanizing groups of people that we tend to dehumanize just naturally. And so I think narrative is really important in kind of explaining and dissecting and talking about Coates' book, his personal experiences. And there's an incident that I dealt with where I got to read a piece written by someone who had experienced an act of racial discrimination. And reading that, it was really powerful to see their point of view, but also I saw somebody else who read it and became defensive about it, you know, so like just keeping that in mind, the power of the narrative, but also how it's presented.
Yeah.
And the discussion following that narrative.
Yeah, I think
And being willing to talk through when people are defensive.
I think that's like one of the reasons why we kept the PowerPoint so short was because we did want to leave like a ton of room for like discussion and like questions and comments and like all of that. Especially like since we will have some scenarios, like we want to make sure that like it's not, again, like we're not talking at people and it's like a conversation sort of thing.
And in line with narrative, have you guys thought about using like Kendrick Lamar or like Beyonce and like analyzing lyrics or using their music
J. Cole.
videos?
Or
Oh,
Get
J.
Out.
Cole.
Yeah.
Or Get Out has a lot of really good
Yeah.
examples of microaggressions.
Absolutely, yeah.
So true. Yeah.
Anything else you guys think we should like include? All right.
We have one last question, and it is, do you think our presentation is appropriate for people just starting to think about white supremacy? Is it for people who have a more intermediate or advanced understanding? Where do you sort of gauge the audience for this to be appropriately placed? Go for it.
I would say that it probably falls more in line with intermediate, like balancing between beginning and intermediate, but I think people have to come into this presentation already willing to recognize that white supremacy is a thing in order for it to be most effective.
I think it could be a really good beginning project, honestly, because I think that understanding the different levels of racism is something that if you can point it out right when somebody first starts thinking about racism, then they don't have to backtrack and kind of relearn how they thought about racism in the first place. So I like it as a foundation or as the very beginnings.
My concern about it for a beginning audience is that beginning audiences often have people who are in there who are adamantly opposed to even acknowledging that racism is a contemporary reality.
Yeah.
And this is not going to be effective for that audience.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be effective for people who are open to the idea, I think, that racism exists, but aren't very clear about it and don't have the language to talk about it. Because what we've seen this kind of training do for people is give them a common language to talk about the problem that's so often missing in our common discourse.
Okay.
And this could do that for the very kind of audiences that you have identified in your presentation.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that's our last question. If no one has anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job, team.
Yeah.